Hello, everyone. I'll introduce myself, and then I'll talk a little bit about what we're going to do today, and then we'll dive in. So my name is Nancy Colier, and I am a psychotherapist, interfaith minister, a mindfulness teacher, and the author of a bunch of books. The last one was The Power of Off, The Mindful Way to Stay Sane in a Virtual World, which is apropos today and our new virtual world. But I spent a lot of time as a professional athlete, as an equestrian, studying, as the athlete, but then studying what it takes to win, what makes people win. And eventually I became more interested in what makes people well and what creates a sense of well-being. And that has led me to mindfulness. And today I've been asked to talk about being present, this idea that we hear constantly in everything, right? How to be in the present moment. And particularly when we don't really care for the present moment. It's pretty easy, if we're at the beach and all is well, or we're doing something we enjoy, but it's not always that easy when things are hard. So I'll talk for a while, hopefully not too long. And then I want to open up to questions, because that's really where it's more interesting. What are the obstacles that you have in terms of being present, and what are your thoughts on it? And then at the end, I'm going to give everyone an opportunity to do a short meditation. So if you want to stick around for that, we can do that. And just a little practice that assists mindfulness. So I'm going to use being present and mindfulness somewhat interchangeably. Mindfulness is the umbrella term under which being there isn't anything now that hasn't been applied to mindfulness. It's in every field, and it should be. It's a really powerful practice. But essentially, mindfulness is paying attention to this present moment on purpose, with friendliness and curiosity, and without judgment. So it means that we are doing what we're doing. We're paying attention to what we're doing, and that we're not judging whatever is happening in the present moment. And there are a couple quotes that I love. I always come back to regarding mindfulness. One is by a wonderful teacher named Jeff Foster. There are two core fears: losing what you have and not getting what you want. There is one solution: falling in love with where you are. And the second is a Zen koan, actually. And it says, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. And so it's speaking to the way we pay attention, right? It's not that we change what we do. We don't need to change what we do to create well-being or happiness, but it's how are we attending to what we're actually doing? Are we there in it? So I want to just take a step back for a moment and say what maybe you already know, but lawyers suffer disproportionately high levels of depression, substance abuse, and suicide. Lawyers are almost 4 times more likely to be depressed, twice as likely to be alcoholics as non-lawyers. And according to the CDC, lawyers rank 4th in the professions with the most suicides. So what we're talking about today is not just for times of pandemics, which hopefully this will be our only one of those. But this is for all the time. This is about the conditions in which lawyers live psychologically and emotionally. And this applies to all the time, not just now in a pandemic. But according to, I think it's Andy Benjamin, who was at the University of Washington, he said the trouble starts in law school, where students encounter high workload, stress, intense competition with their peers, and an emphasis on analysis and linear thinking that causes a loss of connection with feelings, personal morals, values, and sense of self. And it said in one study, 40% of law students were suffering from depression by the time they graduated. So it sounds like lawyers would not be that good at practicing mindfulness, because mindfulness creates a state of well-being. So it sounds like lawyers would be good candidates for learning a little bit about mindfulness, at least to my ear, and hopefully to yours as well. So the first thing I want to look at is, how do we lose mindfulness? What gets in the way of being where we are? Because naturally, we're just where we are. We land there, we notice the trees, or we notice what's on our desk, or what have you. We hear, all these things are part of being present, but it doesn't seem so easy. So what gets in the way? The first thing, and this really applies to lawyers, and I've worked with so many lawyers over decades as a psychotherapist, but is working all the time. There is this sense that, I always have to be getting ahead of the game. I always have to be working. If I have a free moment, I have to be working. So for high-level lawyers, they're in a state, you all maybe are in a state of 24/7 availability. There's part of you always distracted, always thinking about what you can do for the next case or for the next thing that you're working on. And that kind of obsessing and thinking, what's tricky about it is that you're rewarded for it. A good lawyer, I had one person once tell me, a good lawyer is an unhappy lawyer. That usually means that you're paying enough attention to all the things you have to do. So that is one of the primary things that gets in the way, is this obsessing. Always, our mind is always on the work. And that doesn't stop in a pandemic. If anything, it's ramped up, because we're always working. Now we're just home at the same desk. We're just there, and you always can work. So you're always attending to your clients. You're always available. And then another thing here is busyness. This obsession we have with staying busy, being productive, getting things done, doing. And what that does is it creates a kind of inner environment where we're always jumping from thing to thing, and we miss what's actually happening in the moment. We're so focused on what's the next thing that we're doing, next. Another thing in the way is multitasking. We are, all of us, constantly multitasking. And it comes back to that chopping wood and carrying water. When we're chopping wood, just chop wood, right? We don't need to be carrying water and building the house and responding to a client. We are all guilty of this sort of habit of multitasking. And what we know is that when we're multitasking, we're really nowhere. It's really a myth that we're in many places at once. We're not. We're actually nowhere. We're not fully in any of the things that we're doing. So we miss out on all of it. We've got a little bit in every meadow, if you will, but we're spread our enjoyment suffers of each of those. We never land in anything. And the biggest element that gets in the way of our being present takes us right out of the moment. And again, as lawyers, you're trained to think. That's what you get paid for. That's your work. So it's going to feel a little counterintuitive to say thinking is a problem if we want to get into this moment. But what happens is that we are physically in this present moment, but our mind is in the future or in the past. That's where our mind likes to live. It really doesn't know what to do in now. So it jumps to what if, or, oh, that could happen, so let me stave that off, let me make sure that doesn't happen. Or it might be caught up in, oh, that conversation I had, 2 days ago, I said the wrong thing, I'm back there. Again, this parenthesis that is now is completely skipped over. And all of this is happening in front of us, but we're there or we're there, right? And right now, in what's happening, a lot of us are living very much in what if, in a very, very fearful way of what might happen in the future. But again, we're missing a sense of what's happening now, right? Or we're worrying about something that we could have done in the past that would have protected us from now, protected our future. And again, tricky territory, because as lawyers, you are, again, paid to some degree for anticipating what could happen, to getting ahead of that. But when it comes to this being present, that is in the way. So we always want to be coming back to, but what's happening now? Am I okay right now? What am I sensing right now? And we'll get into that a little bit more in the future of this talk. But future and past, where is my mind? A second thing that thinking does that gets in the way of our being present is that we are always constructing some sort of storyline about what's happening in the present moment. So something is happening. Let's say I have a pain in my foot, right? Right away, I'm thinking, oh, why do I have that pain in my foot? It must be because the sneakers I wore are not the right sneakers that I should be wearing. And I don't run enough. And why don't I run enough? And I should be running more. And wow, I'm not really living the life I should be. Why is everyone else living the life that they should be? And God, maybe the fact that I don't run is why I'm not as happy. We're so far out from that pain in our foot. And we've got a whole narrative. We're in a movie now. We're in a movie, and it might take us, a week. It might take us 10 minutes, but we're writing stories all the time. Or we're walking with a friend and we give her a present for her birthday and we see an expression on her face right down the rabbit hole, right? She didn't think the present was good enough. She thinks I'm cheap, whatever it is. Immediately we're in an alternate reality. This happens to every human being on the planet 24/7. And that thinking, that constructing of a story has then taken us out of this present moment, the pain in the foot, or the expression that we actually don't know what it means. We're long gone from that. So thinking is a really complicated activity. It's incredibly helpful, and it's what distinguishes human beings from other species. At the same time, it is the giant kidnapper of the present moment. We're lost in thoughts all the time. We're lost in our own universe of thoughts, but we're not actually here where we are. And one particularly prevalent narrative for many people is a narrative that starts with the word should. So a lot of our thoughts have to do with what should be happening, right? This shouldn't be happening, or I should be doing this, or on and on and on and on and on. So one particular narrative that we get tangled up in and that kidnaps our present moment is this should. As soon as we're involved in should, we're not actually where we are. We're not in the present moment. We're in some sort of adversarial or resistant relationship with what's actually happening. So thinking is our biggest opponent. How to use thinking for a tool, an incredible tool, but not allow ourselves to disappear down the rabbit hole all the time into thinking and constructing stories and going into past and future and what should be happening. So why is it important to be present? What are the benefits of mindfulness, of being present? First of all, at a very basic level, it means that we are in our life. It means that we're actually inhabiting our life as it's happening. So many people come and see me and they talk about, I don't know where the last 10 years went, or, I don't know where I've been, because I sure as hell don't feel like I've been in my life or present for it. And that's a tragedy. That's something that we really can prevent as we start to practice mindfulness. It's amazing, even when our life situation is very, very difficult, but when we're running away from it or avoiding it, it's actually more painful because we know it's there. We know the thing is there that we're avoiding. It's actually far better for our nervous system and for our well-being when we're in the thing itself, no matter what it is. No matter what it is, it's better to be in it. And also just to have a sense that we are showing up for this existence, basically showing up. On a more physical level, we know from hundreds of studies that it lowers stress, that practicing mindfulness, practicing being present lowers stress. And it impacts every system in the body. We know that it makes us calmer, happier, less anxious, more grounded, and a sense of being in sync with our life, not absent, not sort of popping in every now and again to realize, oh, this is my life. It is happening. We're actually in sync with it, where it's happening. So our life feels real. We're with it as it's unfolding. So those are some pretty powerful benefits, and we're happier. I mean, if as I said before, if you boil it down, we're happier. So lawyers who practice mindfulness, this came from a study from the University of San Francisco, experience everything from increased emotional self-awareness and self-regulation to improved capacity to handle stress and increased concentration and psychological flexibility. Mindfulness practices increase lawyers' capacity to be present and high functioning, no matter how unpredictable or potentially distressing the situations in which they might find themselves. And we also found that practicing mindfulness makes lawyers more skillful at handling stressful situations at work and in their personal lives, and it increases well-being overall. So in predictable ways, they went on to say that clients are also better served when their lawyers have a deeper set of resources for handling stress and dealing with conflict and uncertainty. Finally, clients benefit from their lawyers' greater sense of compassion and greater ability to communicate in ways that maintain a sense of concern and respect. So that sounds like lawyers, again, would be good candidates for it, for this practice of mindfulness and being where we are. I mean, it's a funny thing to have all these words around being where we are, which seems so obvious, right? And yet it's the least obvious thing when it comes to practice. But again, to remember that by nature, We are here. We are present. If we don't leave the scene of our life, we are here. So, how do you do this thing, right? And again, I don't want to complicate this. That's why I don't want to talk too long about this, because we don't want to turn it into another mental exercise. We don't want to turn it into another to-do list that becomes yet another way that we actually leave the moment. Right? Paradoxically, we can practice and practice by thinking about it and knowing all about it, but we're doing the very same thing. We're not where we are. So it's also important to notice that, I don't know if you've ever heard, there's a term in psychology called the G.I. Joe fallacy. But the G.I. Joe, I think at the end of every G.I. Joe show, he would say, knowing is half the battle. And what the G.I. Joe fallacy in psychology is that's false. When it comes to changing habits, knowing is not half the battle. We don't actually change habits by knowing. We change habits by practicing new habits. So we can be incredibly well versed about why something is something and not be able to do it any differently. It's very helpful to know about it, but it's about changing our habits. So that said, mindfulness is a practice. It's not a study so much as it is something we do. So what are some of the things that we can actually do to start practicing mindfulness? Not talking about it and knowing about it, but doing it. The first thing is setting an intention. We set an intention every single day when we get up to strengthen our mindfulness, strengthen our awareness, strengthen our presence. Like everything, starting with a sense of intention that this is something we want to do. This is not just another thing that we're interested in or dabbling on the internet about, buying some interesting books that sit by our bedside. Reminding ourselves we want to do this, right? We want the benefits of this. Something in our life feels maybe not working to full capacity, or we have a sense we could feel happier or more present or less stressed. So why are we doing this? And now I want to set the intention to actually practice. We start the day with a sense of intention, reminding ourselves, and you can wear a band on your wrist, or you can put a photograph of something that reminds you of being present, or you can put a rock on your desk that says breathe. We can use these little prompts to remind, oh, I'm trying to strengthen my awareness. I'm trying to show up more for the center of now. I want to be in the center of now a bit more. The second thing we can do is we start to introduce a question into our regular life, which is, where am I? Where am I? It's pretty simple question. Am I here? Am I present? It's such a simple question, but it is, and it's profoundly powerful, but it's a question we very rarely ask ourselves. Am I actually doing this thing, or am I on the beach in Hawaii, or am I in that fight with my spouse? Where am I? Am I here? And we can set up little things along the way. I used to practice with doorknobs, that every time I reached a doorknob, I would ask myself, am I here? Am I in my body? Am I in this space where I'm walking now? You could, every time you come to a red light, you can say, am I here? Am I present? Link it up with something that happens a lot in your life. For me, walking between my two kids' bedrooms when I would put them to bed, for some reason I linked the hallway between their two bedrooms. Am I here? Am I showing up for these bedtime rituals? So you can link it up with something every time you see a white wall, although that might become very busy. But this question, and again, band on the wrist or any sort of reminder, where am I? Am I here? Oh my God, no, I was doing my taxes, whatever it might be. The third thing is similar to the where am I question, but starting to notice what's happening, not just where am I, but what's happening in my mind. So we start to build, in mindfulness, it's called a witness, that every now and again, we turn that witness lens on what's happening in my mind. Is it a really busy environment? What's the weather like? Am I chattering like crazy? Am I catastrophizing what might happen in the future? Am I telling myself a story about what my spouse just meant in this moment, or what my friend meant, and so on and so on? We just step out of the sort of attachment to the thoughts, the believing of the thoughts, and we just take a look. Is it a tsunami in my mind right now? Am I torturing myself? Is the self-critic here telling me I'm not doing something well enough? Whatever it is, we don't get involved in the storyline. We just pull the lens back and take a look. So we start to make that an actual practice. Pull out, look. We can even name criticizing or obsessing, or in Hawaii, or worrying, whatever it might be. We can name it if that's helpful. And we just take a pause and look. Another piece of that is we set up a little bit of, we could call it a distraction police officer inside ourselves, inside our mind. So we start to notice, am I distracting myself? Right? When we go on eBay to shop for something we don't need, or we're looking at, refrigerators that we're not really going to buy, or travel trips we can't, whatever your rabbit hole is, right? We start to introduce this distraction police, which is, am I just running away from being here right now? Am I busying myself with some sort of distraction? Am I binging on Netflix because I don't know what else to do? It's not so much about not doing it. It's, again, about awareness. So mindfulness is all about, I may still choose to watch that 28th episode of whatever it might be, but I'm saying, I'm distracting myself. I want to not be here. Okay. And maybe once in a while I can say, well, what would I have to feel if I didn't distract myself? So whenever we're down that rabbit hole, distracting ourselves, there's something we don't want to experience right here. So we can ask ourselves, not just, am I distracting myself, but what would I have to feel if I stopped doing this? And I, for one, I ask myself this with technology all the time. I use WAIT as the acronym. Why am I teching? So I stop every time I reach habitually, and I just stop for a moment, a pause, and I say, why am I teching? What would I have to feel if I didn't distract myself with my phone right now? Right? Is it a legitimate, am I really waiting on something I need to know? 99.9999 for me, it's not. So I have to ask myself, what am I distracting myself from? And that is a practice of mindfulness, just that question. In terms of, so those are all things that we do throughout the day. They become part of the fabric of how we live. We're really starting to be a little bit wary of our own mind, not believing maybe, or thinking that whatever our mind is up to, it's the best idea. So we're starting to turn that lens on our mind itself. In terms of a practice, most of you know that meditation is the basic practice of being present. It is the mindfulness practice. And yet there are many ways to meditate. So even that is not incredibly specific. So what I recommend is that 5 to 15 minutes a day, we get quiet. And the easiest or most direct experience is to drop out of mind, unhook from the thoughts going on in your mind, just taking a little bit of a break. You can remind them we'll get back there. I promise you the obsessing will be waiting. But dropping down into your body and just starting to pay attention to the felt experience. The body is here, feel its weight. Feel the sense of landing in this moment. You might notice sounds coming into now. And then allow your attention to just simply rest on the breath. So you might feel a coolness in your nostril. You might feel a kind of expansion in your belly. But you just simply feel the breath. The body is breathing itself. So you don't have to do anything. You're just attending to the breath. And just is a funny word because you might have in a 5-minute sit, you might have, 10 seconds where you feel you're actually present and staying with the breath. That'd be good for a starting place because the mind is going to woo, woo, that's the nature of the mind. It's called a monkey mind in Buddhist practice because that's what it is. It's just wild. And, it might be 4 minutes and 58 seconds and you realize the whole meditation you've been deciding what to have for dinner. Totally normal. And as you practice a little bit more, though, you start to notice that you catch yourself lost in thought more often and quicker. So, and as soon as you catch yourself, no judgment to it. It's like judging a golden retriever for chewing your shoes. That's what it does. That's what the mind does. That's what a golden does. So you just come back to the next breath. That practice is an incredibly powerful practice. And it's sort of the basic. It's the grounding of many Buddhist practices. We use the breath because the breath is always there. If we're alive, the breath is there. And the breath is not something that we have to effort or make happen. We don't need the mind, gratefully, to breathe. So we're just tuning into something that's happening that's below thinking. And the practice is simply to keep our attention and lightly resting on the breath, staying with the breath. Monkey goes away, we come back. It's athletic training for the mind. One other one that we can practice with, if that feels just that it doesn't work for you, which is fine. Sometimes it takes 4, 5, 10 practices to find one that feels like yours, but we can do a walking meditation, 5 to 15 minutes a day, where we just pay attention to walking. We can do this in a pandemic indoors, we can do it outdoors, but we pay attention to the feeling of the foot hitting the ground, to the air against our skin. We pay attention to any sensation that's happening as we walk. The mind gets lost, it sees an object, oh darn, I have to get a new one of those, I forgot to get that. I wonder if Amazon, oh, I have to renew Prime, and then 15 minutes it's gone. But we come back. It's the same practice. You can explore mantra meditation, looking at a candle, there are millions. But the point is that we're training the mind to come back and away from thinking. I would suggest starting with the breath meditation because it's really powerful. And what we know is that 15 minutes a day, if you can get to that 5 days a week, after about a month, we see radical changes in the way people experience their life. It actually changes your DNA. The whole plasticity of the brain, there's an enormous field of study about how meditation changes the brain. It makes you more empathic. It makes time expand. It's so exciting what it does. And what we found is 15 minutes a day, but I have noticed changes in people that do 5 minutes a day. So we start where we can. And again, this is a practice not about judgment and competition. It's about doing the best you can. And as you see positive effects, you might want to go up a little bit in time. The next thing that is part of this mindfulness practice is when we're not present, when we're lost in thought or where we're distracting ourselves or whatever we're doing, we're not in our body. We're up here. We're like little heads floating around attached to nothing. And then we might have a pain in our foot and it's like, oh, we have a body. I didn't realize there was anything below this. That's remarkable. And so part of the mindfulness practice is getting into your body. So we do that in part by, again, using the breath. The breath is a portal right into now. It drops us, boom, right into now, because the body lives in the present moment. The mind lives anywhere but the present moment. The body lives now. So we drop into a conscious breath. We stop what we're doing and we take a deep breath. That is an act of profound presence. We inhabit that breath. We use the breath to connect with the body, to connect with the present moment. We can also do something called a sense loop, which is anywhere we are during the day. And I may do this every couple hours. I just spin around my senses. I drop out of whatever I'm thinking about and I check into what I'm seeing. I check into what I'm smelling, what I'm hearing, what I'm feeling, what I'm tasting. I go through 10 seconds on each and I just reground with the senses, because the senses, again, are direct. They're now. So they're kind of the easiest way to drop into now, right out of the head. We reorient in the body, which, thank goodness, is not dependent upon the mind's presence to keep us alive. The body keeps living in now, digesting the food, doing whatever it's doing, whether our mind is lost or not. Thank goodness. The heart beats. It doesn't rely on our paying attention. The body was set up with an incredible wisdom that way, knowing that the mind works to stay present. It's not its natural state. We can also do, as a body practice, I'm giving you a few on each, but just a body scan. We move through the body and we check how's it going in our toes right now? Any tingle? Do we feel tingling? We move our attention around our body just like we would a magnifying glass. And that, again, is just about coming into now. It's not because we're so interested necessarily, maybe, in what's happening in our knees, but moving the attention around like that is a practice of mindfulness. And almost last, I would say, the practice of gratitude. And I call it savoring more than gratitude, because gratitude has a little bit of a should around it these days. There's so much about gratitude, and we're supposed to be making lists, and you don't have enough on your list and you're supposed to do it all the time. And sometimes my sense, working with so many people, is that it's not so much about gratitude. Gratitude is an incredible practice, but it's about savoring, so that when something is happening that's delicious in the day or night, we stop for just a moment, and maybe we just put a hand on our heart or whatever it is, close our eyes, and we take it in. When my kids were young and I would go to the playground with them, and sometimes I would just stop and just be so thankful that I was alive for this, and I could sit there and watch this laughter, whatever it was. But if you have a conversation with a friend and it touches you, or somebody says something nice or does something nice or makes dinner, whatever it might be, just stop for a moment and take it in. That's an act of being present. That's an act of absorbing what's actually happening right now. If something moves you, if it makes you cry, we stop. We don't rush through life, missing those moments to savor and feel grateful for, to really feel grateful. So the practice of gratitude is wonderful at the end of the day or throughout it. But again, it's a remembering. I'm wanting to introduce you to, in this moment, I feel such a sense of gratitude in getting to have this experience. And I want to leave that there as the final mindfulness practice. There are many others, like getting enough sleep, getting exercise, again, the body, getting a mindfulness buddy, if you'd like, to do this with. But the big ones are the ones that I just completed with gratitude. These are the real, the roots of mindfulness. So what I want to say in conclusion, and then I'm going to open it up if I hope people have questions, and they'll be confidential. I won't say your name. You can put them in the chat. But this business of doing what you're doing when you're doing it. It's like a child's rhyme, you know, when you're chopping wood, chop wood, be there. And starting to check in with yourself as a habit, that needs to be a habit. Am I here? Where am I? Am I in my body? Am I having this conversation now, or am I lost somewhere else? Right? Am I distracting myself? Am I lost in a storyline that I'm making up? What's the story I'm telling myself now? This is happening, but what's the story? Am I deep down the Netflix hole, distracting myself or shopping, right? Not in the present moment. So we become witness to our own mind, our own thinking. Right? That has to be habit. And then this dropping down out of head into body. The body is an easy, it's like a giveaway. We just have to drop into it, and we're here at the center of now. And then finally savoring when things happen that touch you. Don't miss those. Those are the pearls that make up the necklace of life. So show up for them. And I'm going to leave it there. So I invite you into the present moment, into the center of now, where things are well, and open up your questions. What I'll do is I'll wait. We've got about, we're about 43 minutes in, so we've got about 17 minutes, and I want to leave about 6 or 7 for meditation for anybody that wants to stick around. So I'll open it up for 3 or 4 minutes for questions, and then I'll move on to a meditation. So the question is, do you encourage journaling to help with mindfulness? So that is a very personal choice. For some people, it's incredibly powerful because it tells you what's happening in your mind right now, it tells you what's happening in your heart as you write. One thing to watch out for, and the reason I don't put it on my fundamentals list, is because when we're writing, we can kick off the mind. So we want to be careful and aware that when we're writing, we're not writing so much our thoughts about what's happening in our world, but we're in that space where the heart and the mind and the body are moving your hand. So you can practice with this, where am I just writing and it's just more thinking? I'm just writing out more thinking. Or am I entering that space the artist way? Writing, no judging, no even looking back on what you're writing. You're just writing and letting your stream of consciousness move your hand. If you can write that way, it is a practice of mindfulness, We don't want just another way to strengthen thinking, however. I hope that, does that answer? Good, okay. And that is something that we have to be very mindful of our own practice of it, right? It's not something that has a one answer. We have to be aware of how we're using it. And it's funny, I will share with you that right now on my street, they seem to be having a motorcycle race of some sort. So practicing mindfulness is not only when it's silent. It's not only when things are calm. Practicing being present means being present with these motorcycle sounds. It means being present with the hooting and hollering that's going on without a resistance to that. It might be that I wish it weren't happening, that's included, but it's not a resistance to the sound itself. So in mindfulness practice, we welcome whatever is here, right? Sound, sensation, and no judgment of it. That's a part of the practice. So I'm welcoming these sounds. And even as I say that, they've gone.